Good evening. How you guys holding up out there? I'm very grateful to be here this evening to the Coalition for Taser Free Berkeley, to the folks here that are letting us use the space, to Berkeley Cop Watch. I see Answer folk out here, to all you people that come out on a Thursday night to talk about such a serious issue for the community. I'm very grateful to be here. There's been a lot of good discussion so far from the brilliant people here on this panel, as well as yourselves. So I'm going to try and just fill in a few details. And I guess I'll start at the place that we just left off here, which was litigation and money. So I know it's not the most dramatic and certainly not the most important part of a Taser discussion, but when you're talking about municipal policy, it plays a role. So the average cost of one Taser, that's one unit, is about $800. That's just the gun, not the holster. You add the holster, that takes it up to about $1,000. If you were to use it, and this is really Orwellian speak here, but if somehow this makes sense, if you were possibly able to use it safely, it would require defibrillators be on hand, which would increase the cost more, and that's not even talking about litigation costs, which Jim did such, training costs, litigation costs, which Jim just did such a great job covering. Speaking of recent litigation, I believe it was last year that the city of Portland, Oregon went into federal receivership by the Justice Department because of their abuse of tasers. Last year as well, there was Taser International quietly closed several cases going up to 2009 to the tune of about $1.4 million. However, they later recovered that money almost immediately subsequently by suing another company that makes phasers for patent infringement for the exact same amount. So it wasn't quite a loss. However, they also in Santa Cruz, a Watsonville man in 2007, excuse me, 2008, Watsonville man in 2008, Stephen Butler won a $2.85 million settlement against Taser. That's the first time that it settled a product liability case. However, and this is going to lead me into some of the more serious business, what happens to people that get tased. The reason he won is that Mr. Butler suffered a serious brain injury after being shot. He has brain damage, no short-term memory, has lost mobility, and his motor skills decreased. He needs round-the-clock care and can't be left alone, according to court documents. His condition is stationary, meaning there is little chance that Butler will ever recover. So, that's the litigation. I want to lead into a few more stories of actual real people who have been tased, and I want to clarify a few statistics as well. At least 13 people in the United States have been killed so far this year by tasers, and at least one in Canada. Last year, the totals, and I say at least because there's a lot of deaths that are missed for reasons I'll get into in just a moment. At least 53 people died in 2013 in the United States from tasers, and 3 in Canada, as well as a smattering of folk in other countries. This is where the most deaths occur. ACLU has done a wonderful job advocating against tasers and covering this material. However, the statistics that are quoted by ACLU, specifically the 542 number that turns up all over the place, the true count is about double that. At least 850 people have been killed by tasers since 1983, and those are the ones we know about. Those are the ones that we know about. The reason I say this, as was alluded to in a couple earlier presentations, there are circumstances that don't get recorded. There's two in particular invented medical conditions that are not supported by the American Medical Association or any doctors that have not been paid by Taser, essentially. But the two conditions are called excited delirium, and the other condition is called sudden in custody death syndrome. Excited delirium has to do with nerve impulses being triggered, a huge raise in body temperature, and resulting in fatality. It's curious that nearly all excited delirium fatalities occur after someone's tased. Sudden in custody death syndrome is another Taser International / law enforcement invention. It's been used in other contexts, but it's used particularly a lot with tasers, and that is where someone just magically happens to die in custody. No one knows why. Of course, if you correlate it with what happened immediately before, i.e. they were tased, as is often the case, or other times beaten severely, then it's not so sudden or mysterious. So if you add those cases which are not documented, I would argue that realistically over 1,000 people have died since 1983 of tasers. A little bit of inference, but after a lot of research, I stand by those numbers. And to that end, I want to talk about some of the most recent cases. So, the most recent one was, that we know of, was a Mr. Daniel Best, 34 years old, Gilbert, Arizona. Mr. Best, at the time of being tased, was outside of his home. He had his clothes off. He was, the police had been called for a domestic issue. It was a verbal fight with his partner. And he was tased, and it killed him. Couple things that this brings up that have been alluded to earlier is that, number one, people in mental health crisis are a big target group of people that are tased. Removing your clothes in public, this is a very common indicator of mental health distress. Two, they mentioned after the fact, which could or could not be justification, that there was a possible presence of cocaine in the person's system. Now, while that, some may say, okay, that's a way for the cops to cover up the dirty doing and whatever, we also need to look at the fact that substances like cocaine in the body, which, as Jim said, cannot be detected in a crisis situation by officers just like that, unless they happen to be specifically trained and heightened aware of this. That raises the lethality rate. So when they're talking about it being less than lethal, again, they're talking about optimum circumstances that never happen on the street. So that was the most recent one. Exactly 1 month prior to that in Baltimore. So this would be May 7th of this year. 1 month prior, we lost George Von King. He was a 19-year-old black man in Baltimore, and he was tased to death while being treated at Good Samaritan Hospital for allergies to medication. And then for local victims, in the hospital. For local victims, we have in October 30th, 2012, Donald Ray McCullough was picked up on a minor, I believe it was parole, although I don't want to get that confused with probation. Let's see here. A probation, not parole, probation, a minor probation violation. He was suspected of second-degree burglary, and conspiracy in police terminology. Basically, he was suspected of having some stuff he didn't have, a nonviolent crime. He was arrested on the probation violation and tased to death while handcuffed in the custody of the Contra Costa County jail system. And the stories go on and on like this, folks. This is not, you know, if I could sit here and read these horrific stories to you for hours and hours and hours. It might take 3 days to get through of constant talking, to get through all of them. This is, but this happens all over the place. And so looking at that, I want to turn, because there's been a lot of discussion of who it's going to be used against, and a lot of the groups mentioned, absolutely, nationwide, absolutely, black folk are the most tased, about 300% more likely. However, as an anomaly in the state of California, the largest group targeted by tasers are actually Latinos, believe it or not, about 41.7%. Of people tased are Latinos, which brings an entirely other issue into it, which is language difficulties. If an officer is giving commands in a crisis situation to someone that may not have a grasp of the language the command is being given in. Whole other issue, as well as other issues of representation, proper medical care, etc. Finally, I will say this, and I hope that I have not spoken too long, but finally I will say this. Working with the Idris Deli Foundation, and I'm honored actually, Misha Mohamed-Rosari, the founder of that organization, is here with us tonight, Mother of Idris Deli. Honored to work with this organization for several years. Working with this organization, we have defeated Taser International and the SFPD 5 times in the last decade.